We've got an exciting guest for you guys today. Edwin Choi is an e-commerce growth strategist and entrepreneur and founder and CEO of the jetfuel.agency. Founded in 2017 after years of working in-house as a direct-to-consumer operator, Choi built JetFuel to eliminate the inefficiency, wasted ad spend, and surface-level tactics common in traditional agency models. Under his leadership, JetFuel Agency operates as a performance and growth engine for fast-growing direct-to-consumer brands, CPG, and omnichannel brands, including high-profile accounts like Perfect Bar and Drunk Elephant. His framework combines paid media, search, paid and social, conversion rate optimization, and retention marketing, email, SMS into a single cohesive revenue system focused on sustainable long-term ROI. Edwin, thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Absolutely, Dylan. I'm super happy to be here.
All right, so I know I gave a little bit of background there, but where did you go to school? What did you study? How did you find yourself working in-house? And then why'd you decide to go out and create an agency after working in-house at some of these brands over the years?
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to school to University of California, Irvine. And believe it or not, I started off as a computer science major, right?
Oh, wow.
I started off coding and building things in JavaScript. And then after the first semester, I was talking to myself and I was like, wow, I hate this. I hate this a lot. I really don't like this. So I switched majors and I wound up doing international studies with an emphasis in management and marketing. And that's what got me super excited to go to class, right? Like I learned about, not only did I learn about marketing, business, and economics, but I also learned about how that transpired on a global scale, right? So after school, what I did was I went to a marketing agency. And guess what? I graduated in 2008. So that was Great Recession, right in the thick of it.
Good timing.
No jobs to be had. I had this little folder on my computer. I submitted 110 resumes. I got 2 callbacks, right? So out of 110, I got 2 callbacks. One was for an unpaid marketing internship, and one was for like a low-paid assistant for a local television station, right? I actually went with the unpaid internship at the marketing agency. And I remember sitting down for the interview, and they were asking me like, hey, we can't afford to pay you. Let us know how many hours you want to work. Like you want to work like 5 hours a week, 10 hours a week. I said, sign me up for 40. Yeah, sign me up for 40. And they said, are you sure? I was like, yeah, sign me up. Because what I was thinking was, I had no other prospects at the time, right? So I was thinking either I would be so useful and learn so much that they had no choice but to hire me, or I would be so useful and learn so much that I could find a job elsewhere. Right?
There you go. That's good. That's good thinking.
Yeah, I came in there and the CEO was like, he's coming in earlier than I am. He's leaving later than I am, and I'm not even paying him. Right? So, so within a month and a half, they made a position for me.
Wow, that's awesome.
They made a position for me because I was a sponge, and I specialize in Google Ads and organic SEO, and that happened from 2009 to 2011. And I left that agency environment and went in-house, right? And when I was in-house, I went to an e-commerce company. We were selling cell phone accessories, right? I was marketing employee number 1. There was one other person there, but then she left right away, right? So I wound up being marketing employee number 1 yet again. And we scaled that thing from 5 million a year to 30 million a year in 4 years.
Wow, that's awesome.
Very brutally competitive space. So I remember being just like a one-man team, and then when I left, the marketing team had 20 people on it. The organization itself went from 20 to 110 people during that time. So it was just like this massive scaling operation. And then every channel was touched. Like I basically touched each channel personally to launch it, right? So Google, Meta, we were one of the first 5 beta advertisers.
No way. That's crazy.
Yeah. And I remember the conversation during that time. Everyone was saying, this is never going to work. No one's going to buy stuff off of social media. Like, we're just burning, you're just going to burn money. I was like, okay, well, let's test it out. So email, SMS, affiliate marketplaces, conversion rate optimization, the whole shebang, like the whole enchilada, right? And I left there in 2017, I was intending to take a sabbatical. So I wanted to take a 6-month sabbatical that lasted 6 days, unfortunately, and fortunately, just because so many companies heard about my departure. They kind of went and reached out, said, "Hey, we need some help for growth, we need some consulting, we need a little bit of expertise." And then I was thinking, there's no way I can service all these cool brands, right? But an agency model would be the way. And being in an agency, for my formative years in my career, and also being on the other side of the table where I quite literally hired 13 agencies, fired 12, right? I kind of got a good sense of what agencies did right and what agencies did wrong. And that's where Jetfuel Agency was born. And Jetfuel Agency was really, I was intending that to be just a personification of myself, right? I want to do what I love to do every single day, testing and learning, being at the forefront of marketing, and like mentoring others. Like those three things, I kind of wrote it down. It's like, hey, I would love to do that every day for a living, right? So the agency was just a great vehicle to do that. And lo and behold, we fell into really great niches that I am personally very interested in, right? So the first niche is better for you food and beverage, like mission-driven brands that you'll see on shelf at Whole Foods, for example. Second would be health and wellness, right? And third would be your what I call parts-driven businesses, right? So it's very similar to cell phone accessories. I love e-commerce companies that have a large SKU count. Think about things like telescope parts or aftermarket automotive performance. Like those are somewhat boring sounding businesses, but they're quietly doing 20, 30 million a year. Like it's, they're making bank, right? And we now do paid search, paid social, retention marketing, SEO, and ranking for ChatGPT, which is what we call AIO, right? I'm sure you heard that as GEO or AEO or any number of terms. And coming into at tail end of 2025 and all of 2026, and obviously we're heavily involved in AI and kind of building an AI operating system in-house at Jetfuel Agency. So it's kind of brought us here to today.
That's awesome, man. You mentioned these three categories, the parts kind of side of things with like large SKU catalogs. Obviously, you having experience, having built that in-house team from 1 to 20 people and scaling that brand. And then also categories like wellness and better for you, CPG. That's kind of a nice thing. You mentioned that those are things that you're passionate about. So do you only go after categories or clients that you feel passionate about the category or that you've been able to have past experience scaling, or would you take clients from a category that was not in one of those three? If how do you evaluate new client opportunities or go after new business?
Yeah, I would say it's a mix of both, right? So I would say 90% of the clients that we take on, I myself am a customer or potential customer, right? And because if you do that, you kind of know what to speak to because you're having those purchasing decision conversations in your head while you're walking through the aisle at the grocery store or whatnot, right? So that would be number one, right? And in terms of number two, the client fit, a lot of that is outside of the vertical, right? Like we want to make sure we work with clients that we're aligned from like a test and learn standpoint. We're aligned from a budgetary standpoint. We're aligned from a communication standpoint. Our goals are aligned in terms of what we want for short and long-term goals. So that is really important. Like if all of that is top notch, like we're getting green check marks across the board, we're happy to learn about a new vertical, right? Like I've learned a lot about plumbing parts, right? I'm not necessarily super interested in plumbing parts, but I can speak to the best of it now. If you work with a client in, maybe you work with skincare is another example, right? I'm not a world-renowned expert on skincare, but I know enough to be extremely dangerous, right? So, for example, that would be an example of us diving into a vertical, and as part of the job, you're expected to really know who you're selling to, right, and what they care about, and what keeps them up at night. So, hopefully, that answers your question.
Yeah, I love it. I love that story about the internship. It's a hard time right now for young people to find work, kind of historic unemployment rates at the entry level and just a lot of anxiety, probably a similar market, I think, from what you entered. I don't even know if you can hire free interns anymore unless they're getting college credit. I think that was a special time. But if somebody could get, an entry level internship that paid minimum wage and kind of use that same thinking that I'm just going to, outperform, the expectations and get hired and get promoted quickly. Would you recommend that as a strategy to young people who kind of came out of school and had visions of, becoming a Big Four consultant right away, and those
Yeah.
jobs aren't there, and the only callbacks they're getting is for internships at marketing agencies?
Almost always. I just had this conversation yesterday with someone who is 22 and graduating from college, and was saying, "Hey, like, should I get into drop shipping? Should I day trade?" And I said, "No, get your hands dirty. Like, go find a, a a company with strong mentors, with strong bosses and managers. Doesn't matter what you do, right? You could be bagging groceries, right? You could be serving at a restaurant. You could be giving free uh, email marketing to a local service business. Get your hands dirty. Get your hands dirty. Start talking to people. Start learning. Like, build a small portfolio for yourself. Do it for free. I remember when I was looking for a job, right? I was doing free marketing work for local service.
Wow.
Yeah, while I was looking for a job, just so I could build that portfolio. And then I learned so much from doing those things, because I've always been the type of person where you want to put yourself in a slightly uncomfortable position, or maybe very uncomfortable position, and then just see what can you do to make yourself comfortable, right? So that would always be my advice. I think you could, maybe it is true that in this day and age there might be less opportunities, but you can also mine for more opportunities with greater ease than ever before, right?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think there might be less obvious ways in, but so much more opportunity if you're willing to roll up your sleeves and do the work. So, all right, let's talk about, you talked about the idea that you had, hired 12 agents, 13 agencies and fired 12 of them. You launched JetFuel after working inside e-commerce brands with that experience of having hired and fired a lot of agencies. What were the biggest gaps or flaws that you saw in those traditional agencies that you wanted to set out to fix when you launched JetFuel?
Yeah, I mean, three main things come to mind. One is operator expertise, right? It's very different when you run a marketing channel with someone else's money, right? Versus
Yeah.
running an operating marketing channel with true ownership mentality, meaning it's your company's money, right? So I think that there's a very big DNA difference between those two things. That would be number one. Number two is making sure that you have that famous quote, right? Every action generates an equal and opposite reaction, right? I think every marketing action should generate a learning or insight. Otherwise, it has no reason to exist, right? So sometimes I see campaigns built by agencies that are templated out due to best practice. Maybe it works for like 70% of the portfolio. But what if it doesn't work for us? Like, if it doesn't work for us, I'm okay with that. But what are we learning here? Like, what's the next step? What are we doing, right? So that was the other big gap. And the third was there was a lot of great execution at agencies where people knew how to build a campaign, but there was a lack of great strategy behind it, right? Even questions like, hey, Black Friday's coming up. Should I run a 30% or 40%, or should I not run a deal at all, right? And then at that point, like, I'm kind of counting on them to know more about me based on their portfolio and data, and give me some guidelines or playbook for what to do, right? But too common, it was the opposite. Where I was.
It's proactivity, would you say, is kind of, they've got, like you said, good operators who know how to do campaigns, but they're kind of running from a best practices playbook, and they're not being as strategic a partner as they could in bringing, new ideas to the table every week.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely a piece of that, and then but also being able to see the forest beyond the trees, right? And not being too zoned in, tunnel vision on your channel or your expertise.
Yeah, very interesting. Many direct-to-consumer brands treat paid social, search, email, SMS, all these different tactics and channels as isolated silos. How do you build a unified growth engine where acquisition and retention actually become a feedback loop?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first of all, do we have the North Star, right? What is it? What is it that is important to the business, right? So we have a lot of business that say, hey, I have 3 North Stars, right? I want my annual revenue to be this number. Let's call it 50 million. I want 70% of my marketing budget to be acquiring new customers, and here's how I measure that. And then I want this much budget directed toward repeat, and I want them to buy on average, I don't know, 3.7 times, right? I'm using these numbers from the food space, which is very, very heavily based on repeat purchase. So I think once you kind of have that in, a watched metric is an improved metric, right? Is there a clean data source or dashboard? And we can help our clients put that together of these metrics that matter, and what is it that feeds up to these metrics, right? What moves the needle, right? I think once we have that down, for us internally, for our playbooks, each channel has a job to do, right? They have their own role, right? It's almost like a football team, right? Like every position has its own role and job, and they run plays, right, out of the playbook. So it's all the same thing for us. Like we know Meta is really good at both top funnel, mid funnel, and bottom funnel efforts with these certain types of campaigns. So we kind of put that all together, right? Like we say, hey, based on your budget, we recommend these 3 channels. They're going to be doing these jobs. We're going to have these channels talk this messaging throughout, each channel as they kind of hand the customer off, and then that ties together in a very cohesive omni-channel strategy, right? And that floating above that are all the things that help drive enterprise value, right? Like, are we building brand equity? Are we making sure that our household penetration and brand awareness is going up while we're converting the customer? Are we making sure that we're surprising and delighting the customer so they do want that second, third, fourth, right? So you want that healthy dose of just thinking like an owner who's going out, and every day your competitors are trying to bring you down, like having that mindset and putting that all together. Once you have that together, then you simply execute the plan, right? Each channel has a job, each job has certain campaign types, and then you run and iterate from there. So very simplified version, I think, of what we generally do, but yeah, hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I like that. On some recent podcast appearances, you just talked about this idea of founder-led execution, but also how do you move from founder-led to team capabilities? How do leaders, or how should leaders teach their teams to think and make decisions rather than giving them processes to follow?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that's a little underrated is osmosis, right? Or monkey see, monkey do. How often, and I think this is also because of the difficulty of remote work, right? So we're 100% remote agency. Going back to when I was in-house, it was 100% in person, right? This was before the COVID times. And so much learning and kind of exponential stacking and compounding learning happened organically and accidentally, right? Where I would be on my computer and I'll go, oh, this is what I'm doing is so important. Hey, come look at my screen, check it out, right? I might be doing that 7 times a day on average or something like that, right? Very hard to do that remotely, right? For you to do that remotely, you need to force.
Yeah, you have to set a call.
Yeah, you have to force it, right? So what I would do is, before I do something, let's say I'm doing something like forecasting model, right? Which is a very complex task. And then I might say, oh, you know what? These 4 people could benefit from it, right? And then what I would do is I would do a work session, share my screen, I'll record the whole thing, and I'll just do my task, but I'll talk out loud. It's like, oh, I'm moving this number here. This is my reasoning for it. I'm going to shift this up and down. This is my reasoning for it. So a lot of that, I'm trying to force that osmosis so they build that mental architecture and that framework, right? And then now we have AI, right? So the transcript can get sent over to Claude, and they could build a cool lesson plan, and we'll put that in our onboarding, right? So that's number 1. Number 2 is making sure that they observe the difficult decisions. I think that's where they can learn the most, right? So let's say if we have a campaign that is just tanking, like it's just doing horrible, right? I think that everyone learns more from that than our campaigns that are just hitting home runs, right? So we would go in and we'll do the same screen share. We'll do a post-mortem. It was like, hey, let's all discuss and hypothesize why this campaign is bombing and what I or we would do next, right? And then in having those kind of out loud conversations on these difficult topics, they get to observe how you make your decision-making process, right? Third thing that we really love to do, I don't know if a lot of agencies or companies do this, but we have a concept called dry runs. Right? It's kind of like role playing. It's funny because I guess it's funny to say out loud, but I would often go into a team meeting and I'll pretend to be a client. I'll act like them because I know their personality, what they care about. So I'll have them present a report to me, and I'll just pretend to be a client. I'll just tear it apart. I'm like, hey, it's like, I don't understand this. I don't think that's backed by enough data. What do you mean by that? But when you do that and you do it in a safe environment, right? Guess what? When the client calls come, they're bulletproof, they're polished, they're ready, right? And by going through those reps and doing so in a safe environment, they're building that decision-making process, right? They're building the framework to be able to respond to difficult questions, right? So I don't think, I'm also going to say we don't have it like 100% figured out, right? I don't want people to think that we really just have it all figured out. But I think those three things has helped a lot.
Yeah, I like that. I as a business development guy, I've always maybe shied away from role playing. I've always thought that, the best opportunity to to learn is by doing, right? But, you make a point, like when you're for a salesperson, the only thing that you're sacrificing is essentially a meeting that could have gone better if you were more prepared and did it well. So there is a lot that's pretty important in this day and age where it's so hard to get meetings because of all of the AI slop out there and all of the spam and like inbound and LinkedIn. So meetings are important and every at bat really counts, especially these days. But, going back to like that operator mentality that you talked about at the top of the show, when you're spending other people's money, it's really important that you don't, use their money to improve your education, right? If you could do that in a low stakes environment where, there's less risk and then you can be more prepared to be a good steward of that budget, I think, definitely shows your thinking as an operator and someone who, is very accountable to the marketing spend that you deploy and you don't take it lightly. So I love that thinking. All right. You've also demonstrated how small incremental gains across the funnel can compound into massive annual growth. What does step-by-step optimization framework look like in practice of kind of testing and learning and making small incremental gains?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we are a huge prospect of, and I say this internally, right? Every day we want to pick up a penny. Right? Every day we're picking up pennies, right? And I say that, I say that on purpose. I repeat myself until my team is like super sick of hearing me say it. If they're sick of hearing me say it, then I know it's seared into their brain, right? So every day we're picking up pennies, right? So what does that mean? Well, it means that if you take a campaign and it's doing really well, what can you do to just really squeeze it, like really kind of take it to the edge of what it can take, right? And that if you instill that mentality in your team, right, then they know that, hey, if I'm doing a 3-to-1 and the client's loving it, every day let's try to get a little more, right? Let's try to get a little more. I think that's the first part. The second part is that we always think about all of our campaigns as having champions and challengers. Right. And every day our job is, hey, we got this champion. It's been running for 6 days. It's been doing so well. How's the challenger doing? I want a new champion, right? Like I want something that can beat it, that could propel the account to another level, right? So I think having that mentality instilled in pretty much every single process we have, right? Like we have a champion, but we always have a challenger. Like we never want to rest on the laurels of the champion, right? I think that's number 2. Number 3 is also just making sure that, a lot of our biggest victories that we have, like if I kind of think back in my career and all the biggest victories that moved the needle, you always got to play and do well in the margins, right? Like, hey, you have your like day to day, you got to execute super well, right? Like, and that goes without saying. That's the expectation, and that's the standard we set for ourselves, right? You're 80% day to day. Well, 20% is you gotta play with the margins a bit, right? And try to zig where others are zagging, right? So, for example, I think a couple of years ago, everybody was running video ads for Meta. It was like 99% video, right? And then I was talking to my team, well, if that's the case, people are going to start zoning out and ignoring video. Maybe we should go more heavily into static, right? Because static was known as the old dinosaur. No one was running them. Let's run them, right? Because if we're zigging when others are zagging, then maybe we can get something. And lo and behold, that was our most efficient asset type for a while, right? Like, because it was a little bit under the radar. We're sort of playing with the margins there until everyone else caught up, and then now we're going somewhere else, right? So I mean, that's kind of where I think is really important in this day and age where everything's AI, so much AI generation, right? But AI is really good at looking backwards, right? It looks at data and it kind of gives you what happened, but it does not do well at taste making, which is figuring out what is going to happen. Like, what is going to go viral on TikTok tomorrow? I don't know. I don't know if anyone knows, right? But if you're on the pulse, right? If you're Gen Z, you're looking at the right things and you're on the pulse, and you have a pretty good chance of doing that. This is a very human activity. So we want to make sure that we have a lot of time dedicated to very human forward-facing things where we're not just iterating and reiterating on what happened yesterday. So yeah, kind of just put all those things together and you get some growth.
Yeah, I think that's smart. Thinking about the AI stuff, we get really, at least I do, I get really, dependent on my AI tools, but AI essentially, like you said, it's synthesizing all past information. And yeah, like the past is a good place for jumping off points on what to do in the future, but it's not going to have a completely unique creative insight outside of the framework of all that data it's collected. And, it's you talked about the idea of like the agency playbook standardization of like, oh, this works for 75% of my clients, but what if I fall in the 25%? Well, with a lot of like the AI optimizations that are coming to the media buying space, it works well for 75% of the advertisers, but not for 25% that fall out of the mean. So yeah, I think that's a good reminder. With changing iOS policies, cookie depreciation, rising customer acquisition costs, how are high-performing direct-to-consumer brands adapting their acquisition strategies today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a couple of ways to feed that bird with multiple scones, right? So let's say, which is like the PETA-friendly way. But let's say that number one, we want to make sure that you're feeding as much data as possible. Right, and you're making sure that data is clean. So, if you're talking about Meta, they have these direct data pipes called the conversion API, right? Making sure that's clean. Number two is that most brands have a lot of first-party data, right? They have their email lists, their SML lists. They have lists on which customers are worth a lot. They have lists on which customers repeat the most. So you want to make sure you can feed that to the channels, right? Whether it be Google or Meta or TikTok. You feed it to the channel because your job as a marketer now is to train those channels to find who you want them to find, right? So do I want a customer that's, average ticket size spending $1,000? Yes, right? Do I feed it information about customers that only buy when they have a big coupon? Probably not, right? Probably not the highest quality customer. We tested that several different ways too. It's crazy how well that works when it comes to training your channel to behave the way you want it to be, right? So I think that's the first part. Second part is how strong is your creative strategy, right? It's almost like going back to, I don't know, have you watched the TV shows, the Mad Men?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, I've watched it at least twice, cover to cover.
Yeah. Okay, so right? So we were in a period, let's call it the golden age of marketing, of digital marketing, where we had so much data on everyone. Like I could go to the Meta and go, hey, I want 43-year-old interested in golf and drives a Benz, right? You could go that deep before. Now you cannot. Okay? Now you cannot. A lot of those data pipes have been blinded by all these updates, right? But what has not changed? The creative, right? So when Donald Draper is sitting in his sofa and going, hey, I want to sell emotion, not product. I want to make sure that if they're driving on the road and they look at billboard, they stop and stare. right? Those same classic marketing principles now need to go to the creative, right? If we don't have any targeting, the creative has to do all the speaking. It has to speak to that 42-year-old male, right? And if you do a really good job and your creative speaks so well to that 42-year-old male and it resonates, and they're scrolling on their phone, they stop. And they call that internally on Facebook, they call that a hover, right? They track if you stop scrolling on something to take a look, right? If you give Meta enough signals, right, and you're causing people to stop to scroll, that feeds the algorithm. And all of a sudden, all the 42-year-old males who love golf and drive the Benz are being targeted by your ads, right? But you have to make sure that those Don Draper principles are there. That you have a great hook, that you have a great emotion, that you have even a 6-second ad, that you have a storyline that causes people to have some sort of recall. So some of that got lost along the way, I would say, because it was so easy to target people. But now that that's gone, we need to go back to that and make sure that we're top notch at that, right? And then number 3, right, is if you're a very high performing direct to consumer organization, right, you need to still make sure that while you're converting and making dollars and cents, right, that you're building brand equity, you're building the brand story, and you're propelling that forward, right? So what does that look like? Well, some of our highest performing brands, they have these great influencer programs, but it doesn't mean that they have, I don't know, 5,000 influencers that they partner with, right? They may only partner with 50 influencers, but they have such a deep relationship with them, and they look so much like the customers they're trying to reach. And those influencers are posting, they're not transactional, they're not mercenaries, they're not just posting for every brand once and getting paid. No, they're posting 3, 4, 7 times, but really building that storyline, and they're building that brand forward. It's making sure every marketing channel you have, yes, it needs to make dollars and cents, and yes, the ROI needs to be there, but the brand equity building, household awareness, all of that is really important. I mean, it helps build, enterprise value.
Many brands burn money trying to acquire new shoppers while ignoring the existing customers. What are the core levers of a post-purchase retention strategy that actually drives repeat orders or LTV?
Yeah, I think a big piece of it is that the answer probably lies in your data. Right? I think the most famous, business school example is you go to McDonald's and that question is, would you like fries with that? It's probably one of the most effective and efficient upsells in business history, right? So making sure that, hey, there's probably something like that in your data, right? So we have this concept that we call a hero SKU. So if you have any brand, usually they have a SKU or category where all the new customers, they kind of flock toward that, right? Let's take protein bars because it's such a competitive category. A lot of them have some sort of low price variety pack where you could try 6 or 8 flavors all at once. There's no big commitment. And that is usually priced at a little bit of a lower price than just buying 8 or 10, right? That's your hero SKU, right? Making sure that you have a great acquisition campaign for your hero SKU is key. Now, once you have that, you probably have a bunch of data, right? Like saying, hey, it turns out that 38% of the people who buy this, they buy chocolate chip, right? So naturally, if you could retarget those customers, go after them with your loyalty program, talk to them on email and SMS, I think it would behoove you to show them chocolate chip because that's what people generally buy for the second purchase, right? So making sure you have those really cohesive, life cycle driven pieces of messaging is key. Second part is timing, right? So if that if someone buys a variety pack and it lasts them, 14 days, it generally lasts them 14 days. They're probably thinking about reorder around day 12. You probably don't want to send them messaging at day 2, right? They're likely not interested. You also don't want to send them messaging at day 29 because they've gone pretty cold, right? So you want to start messaging them around, days 10, 11, 12, because that's when their decision making is starting to wake up, right? And all of a sudden they see your restock messaging, your replenishment messaging, and that's where you can go and make the ask, right? So very simply speaking, we kind of combine those two things and you're getting there. You're going to start to get to a program that's sustainable and repeatable. Then you can add layers on top of it, right? You want to make sure you have a great, what we call tentpole calendar. Like they have reasons to tune in around Labor Day or Black Fridays, you have exciting things to talk about, and they have a reason to stay connected to your brand and get informed, right? You have things like loyalty programs. Like how can you gamify having high action values repeat themselves, right? If a high action value is to refer a friend, then we need to incentivize that action somehow, right? It's very similar to the tax code, right? If they want to incentivize certain actions or disincentivize, then the tax code changes, right? So if you tax cigarettes heavily, all of a sudden people want to buy less cigarettes. So it's kind of similar to that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's it's basically taking the data that you know about your customer and then using that to nudge them in directions that the data is already showing that they would travel in organically.
Yep.
As automated targeting and generative ad creatives become standard, where do you think that human Don Draper insight that we were talking about before will still hold the competitive advantage?
I think it'll hold the competitive advantage, especially when it comes down to the marketplace, right? Because pretty much every single channel operates on a marketplace and an auction, right? And the channels are incentivized to show the ads that are the most, that resonates the most, because Meta wants people to stay on Instagram for as long as humanly possible. So if your ad is super engaging, right, they're going to show your ad more often. If your ad is a dud and no one likes to see it or wants to watch the whole thing, they're going to show it less, right? That's where that Don Draper strategy was going to come in. And that's where things like what we call internally, we call it a competitor gap analysis, right? So what we do is we take our brand and then we take all their direct competitors. So say we have 5 competitors, and then we scrape all the competitor ads, kind of lay it out on the board, right? And then we have some tools internally that we can point at that board and say, hey, here are all the things that competitors are saying, and here's what they're not saying. Like, here's what they're not speaking to. And then whatever they're not speaking to, we want to speak to that, right? Because it stands out, right? It stands out amongst the sea of similar looking ads, right? So if you're kind of doing techniques like that, making sure you're standing out, getting the attention, right? Before they pay attention to your competitors, that's going to play out in your performance numbers.
Having worked with major CPG names like Perfect Bar and Drunk Elephant, how does performance marketing change when brands scale from purely digital onto the retail shelves?
Oh yeah, it gets a lot more fun, I would say. So, so now we're getting into true omni-channel marketing. So for direct to consumer, relatively pure, right? And that's kind of why I love it so much. You find a customer, you acquire a customer, you like convert. Make sure you're addressing their fuzz, right? Fear, uncertainty, and doubts. So if you're addressing your fuzz, reducing friction throughout the whole process, you want them to buy at a high rate, and you want them to come back, right? So direct to consumer is a very pure game to play, I would say. Now, once you get into omni-channel, right? I think there's 2 buckets. There's what we call awareness marketing, and this is where brands that are really striving for that next level of enterprise value, you want your recall percentage, you want the amount of people talking about your brand to go up, you want your household penetration to go up, right? These are really big deals, especially if you're in retail, because you want people to walk by on shelf and go, hey, I just saw that brand at Dollar Tree, maybe I should try it out, okay? So this has a different part, different science behind it. This is where what we call awareness marketing. You want your creatives to really reach the right people and really get them to engage. And I call this, we call this internally, like, are we showing them the right episodes of a TV show, right? Because if you watch, let's call Mad Men, right? Season 1, episode 1, sets the stage, right? Hooks you in. For us, it might be something like what we call the founding story, right? So a lot of brands have these beautiful stories about why they're founded, what their mission is. That might be the first episode they see, right? And then when you get to episodes 2 to 5, right, you introduce the characters and you introduce some plot lines. Like for us, we introduce the emotions, like are we an aspirational brand? Like how do we want you to feel when you interact with us? Are you engaging with us on a deeper level? Are you starting to follow us on social? Are you starting to understand the problems that we're solving, our category and our SKU line, right? And we sort of introduce these things over time. And once you get to the very end, we know you live 2 blocks from Target. Like, are we able to drive you to the store locator on our site and have you hit Target, right? So that would be, your brand awareness bucket. Last but not least, we have something called retail support, right? So this is where brands come to us and say, hey, I just got into Starbucks. I need to make sure that I need to be selling, 5 units a day per flavor in order for me to stay at Starbucks, right? What can we do? So this is where things get really interesting, because you have some of the aspects of awareness marketing, but you also have some of the aspects of what we call geofencing, meaning that there's data available where, quite literally, there's data that's being exchanged through some of these SaaS tools where I could build an audience that says, I want people to go to Target twice a week and spend at least 30 minutes in store. And they're getting that data somehow, and they won't tell me how, I asked, but they're getting that somehow through your phone, right? I don't know if they're buying it or what. But we can send those audiences to Meta, right? And then we can target those individuals, and then making sure that they have ads that say, hey, I'm holding this, protein shake in front of Whole Foods. And they connect with that and say, hey, I know if next time I need a protein shake, they carry this at Whole Foods, right? And then measuring that against their velocity at shelf. So we build these models that say, hey, the 30 stores that we have marketing going toward, they're selling at twice the rate of the 30 stores that don't have any marketing. And then we take it from there.
Are you starting to think about retail media as well in that strategy, where it's like, okay, to some degree I can use more proven performance channels like Google and Meta to drive awareness about my relationship or my new launch in Target? Or I could just go to Target and buy media from Target and then kill 2 birds with 1 stone, make Target like me more, because not only am I supporting their campaign, but I'm also giving them advertising dollars.
So both of those things are key pieces of the bottom funnel, right? Because I would love if people walk in the store and buy it themselves and we don't have to ship it, right? And then the other part of it is retail media, like Walmart, SEM, Target, things like Instacart, anything that bridges online, offline. There is another key component, making sure that retail flows well.
Interesting. All right. You reshaped JetFuel's hiring process to focus on potential and long-term mindset over rigid resumes. What qualities or traits indicate that someone will thrive in a high-speed, fast-paced performance marketing environment?
Yeah, we ask a lot of questions, a little bit less about work and work experience, and a little bit more about personality, right? So one is that the one question that we ask is, what do you think you're top 1% at in a work environment? Which everyone has to prepare an answer for that. And then I ask, what do you think you're top 1% at outside, and why? And I'm looking for the individual that shows a strong self-starter growth mentality. So if someone tells me, man, I really love the guitar, and I started off with watching guitar lessons on YouTube, and I loved it so much I hired a guitar coach. And now all of a sudden I can play ball, right? And I'm like, that's a beautiful answer. That person has exhibited that they started something, they practiced, they weren't led to do it, but they were self-directed to do it, and they improved until they achieved a result. And I don't care what it is. It could be gardening, it could be yarn, whatever, right? But as long as you exhibit those traits in your personal life, you probably exhibit it in your professional life, right? I think that's number one. Number two is resilience. So a lot of our questions are, I think when I used to interview for a job like ages ago, a lot of the questions are like, oh, what's the best marketing campaign, right? Something like that. I like to ask the opposite. I ask about the worst marketing campaign, the worst situation that you had, the most difficult conversation you were forced to have. And I want to see how you handle those, right? If you handle those really well, you're really learning from them. You have a measured response to them. You thought about what went wrong and what you could do better. I put more value in talking to that than someone rattling off their highlight reel, right?
Yeah.
And then number three is their communication, right? Especially because we're 100% remote. We want people who over communicate, who always are proactive in letting us know what's happening, because we don't really ever want to chase for an update, right? It's kind of like a waste of time for leadership, right? Like if someone's continually kind of keeping you in the loop naturally, everything's going to flow a lot better. Everything's going to be more clear. There's going to be a lot less misunderstanding. So I think those three are things that we look for in the hiring process. Make sure they're long-term fits for us.
Love it. All right. Looking across the dozens of e-commerce brands that you've audited or scaled, what's the single biggest mistake that founders make when they're trying to scale from 7 to 8 figures?
Oh, 7 to 8 figures. That's a good one. I think the single biggest mistakes, I see several mistakes.
Or maybe, give me a few of your tops. You're really good at top threes. So if you have a top three, let's do it.
Yeah, I would say the first biggest thing is making sure that the operational framework and architecture can keep up with marketing demand, right? Because
quality.
Yes. Those are you'll be really shocked at how things like shipping time, if your package is broken during shipment, or if you're not fulfilling quality, at how quickly that annihilates your lifetime value. Like you could literally see the charges start to plummet, right? And once your repeat purchase and your lifetime value don't keep up with that, you're in big trouble. Like you can acquire all the new customers you want, but all the new customers you're acquiring are colder and colder and colder, more and more expensive. So you're kind of in a heap of trouble there. That's number one. The second big thing I see is, I think a lot of brands are able to go from 6 figures to 7 figures relatively easily just by paying attention to the dollars and cents, right? But once you go to 8 figures, you need something a little bit bigger for a customer to latch onto, right? Because all too often I see brands say, oh, I'm just going to go after this category because it's hot, and this category is popular. But if there's no soul behind it, if there's no reason for it to exist in the portfolio, customers feel that after a certain point. Maybe you won't feel that at 12 million. You certainly start to feel that at 48 million, right? Like that, the growth sort of stalls, and you sort of see it, right? It's kind of like when Allbirds was scaling, but they couldn't figure out what else to sell but shoes.
And they became an AI company.
Yeah, then they became an AI company, right? They're sort of floundering, right? Because really no North Star. Like, are we producing?
Yeah, and I don't think anybody ever said I aspire to the Allbirds lifestyle, right?
Right.
Like things like the category that I love is surfing and action sports, and I buy and I'm loyal to those brands because it's a representation of who I am.
Yeah.
But like an Allbirds, it's a good shoe, it's a good price point. And all those things work until you said it, you kind of hit the top and you're like, okay, but, does anybody really associate with the brand outside of it being a cheap, decent product, a cheap, decent looking shoe? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's where the brand had no moat.
Yeah.
No moat for the brand, because once a cheaper, better shoe came, they got annihilated. Or once the winds of change came and the fads changed, they had nothing to stand on, right?
Yeah.
So that's where the work is not very sexy work to go in and say things like, who are our best 5 personas and who are the next 5 personas to target, and how does our brand story reflect that? Not very sexy work sometimes compared to how can I make another $10 million, but it's work that's important and needs to be done. Right?
Good foundational stuff.
Foundational stuff. I think that's a real huge part of it, right? And then last but not least is making sure that your sophistication and the quality of talent you have at the company levels up. Because who got you here will not get you there. So if you've kind of focused too much on bringing the wrong people on the wrong bus for too long of a route, I see a lot of issues with that. I think those would be the top 3 that I have.
It's hard to deviate if that's some of the biggest challenges to course correct on, or personnel, if you've let it metastasize over too long of a period of time. So absolutely. I love that. Well, Edwin, so informative, man. You really are a great wealth of knowledge, especially in the categories that you operate in, but just in general across the performance segment. I feel like I learned a lot from this interview, and I'm sure the audience did as well. If folks want to learn more about your agency or direct and reach out, where do you want to send people to stay in touch?
Yeah, check out my site at jetfuel.agency, or you can type in Edwin Choi in LinkedIn. I should be the first one there.
All right.
If I'm doing my job.
Let's go. Awesome. Well, Edwin, thanks again for joining. Really appreciate your time today. If this is the first time you're seeing the show, don't forget to give us a follow or a subscribe if you want to hear from more great agency leaders like Edwin in the future. If you're listening to the show, an honest review on whatever podcast platform you happen to be listening on is how we find a larger audience. So don't forget to do that. And last but not least, if there's a direct-to-consumer brand out there somewhere or a young person who maybe wants to get into the industry, thinking about how to get into marketing and advertising, or maybe somebody who is working at a direct consumer brand and they're thinking about, hey, I'd like to go out and do this for more companies like I have internally. Don't forget to share the show with that person. And with that, I will wish you all a great week, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Thanks, Edwin.
Heck yeah. Thank you.